So we're going to spend the next 75 minutes talking about our program in Arizona. This is not one of those presentations that we may or may not have to sit through where people stand up and say, we're awesome. Yeah, you should be us. You wish you were us. More importantly, this is what we did right and what we could have done better. Because just like every other branch of government, military, law enforcement, or anywhere else I've been, we learn from each other. I'm going to get information from you. You're hopefully going to get some more final information from me. And when you leave this breakout session, hopefully you're going to have things to take back to your own individual judicial branch. I'm not going to sit up here for 10 minutes and talk about the headlines because they speak for themselves. We are under attack from all four corners. We didn't ask for the attacks. We didn't ask for the threats. We did not ask to be the center of every news station outlet in the country. But for good, bad, or indifferent, we find ourselves there. So what can we do to prepare? Have these conversations. Have these uncomfortable dialogues so that we can make sure we get home to our family, make sure our court customers are safe, and make sure our judges don't have to fear for opening the front door. So with that being said, I'm going to tell a little story. It's November 2015. Newly appointed Chief Justice Scott Bales steps into the role, and he creates a strategic agenda. Most of your branches may have something similar. It's basically a 5-year plan. It's a 5-year plan for what Chief Justice Bales wants to accomplish during that tenure. Right out of the gate, the Chief Justice and the folks that were on that steering committee for that strategic agenda were reading the tea leaves, and they realized Arizona was not properly prepared. We had court security, but it looked like about 12 variations of nothing that was common and not necessarily anything that was effective. We had private security. We had volunteers. We had court security officers. We had law enforcement, and everybody was doing it different. With that being said, I'm going to ask an overhead question. Show of hands, how many of you are using judicial branch, either marshals or CSOs, for your court security operations in your courts? Show of hands. Look around if you would. How many of you are using law enforcement to provide a court security operation? Show of hands. Okay. How many of you are using private security vendors, VetSec, Allied, and all those good folks? Yep. How many of you are using a hybrid of all of the above? There you go. Arizona was not unlike that. And there are still some parts of Arizona that are actually using that similar model, but we've come a long way in standardizing the requirements for these folks that are going to provide that mission. Some courts were doing things very well. Some courts were basically making up as they went along. And they could get away with that right up until the moment they couldn't. So Chief Justice Bales, right out of the gate, established the Court Security Standards Committee. Their task was to establish court security standards, needs assessment, and court security officer training. We're not a centralized court system in Arizona, so we give the presiding judges a ton of autonomy to determine what works for them. But, here's the big but, we were going to say what standards those folks were going to have to achieve in order to work in the courts. We also established training for these folks to be deployed in the courts. And that training piece was why I was hired, which we'll talk about here a little bit later. That worked really well until it didn't. Any court that's ever had a committee knows that they move at about a snail's pace. Am I wrong? No. Hey, we're going to form a committee. All right, here's the administrative order. You're on it, you're on it, you're on it. We'll meet in 4 weeks, 4 months, 6 months. We'll get there when we get there. That worked right up until it didn't. This gentleman, Mr. Diaz, June of 2016, Navajo Superior Court in Northern Arizona, decided he did not like the way that the child hearing went, which basically meant that he lost custody of his kids. Walked outside of the courthouse, pulled a firearm from his vehicle, shot and killed 2 estranged family members in front of the courthouse steps. He was not willing to wait on the committee. He simply introduced violence into our world right then and there. Things got moving very quickly subsequent to this shooting. Things that we learned the hard way, threats don't operate on the same timeline as committees, and the courts weren't prepared. In fact, if we have the court administrator and the court security officer that were working in the court that day that happened, they would be the first to tell you when they woke up that morning, that was the last thing that they ever thought would happen in their lives. The last thing. We learned from it. We hate to say it, but we learned from it. And it helped propel a lot of the things that we're doing now. Show of hands. How many of you have had a similar triggering event in your courts where you were doing status quo, life looked good, we thought we were doing a great job, and then something happened that caused you to get slapped into reality and realize, you know what, we weren't prepared as we thought we were? Show of hands. Yep, good. If I'm going to ask this question a year from now, I guarantee you the number of hands that'll come up will be less. Why? Because we're having these conversations and we're preparing for the bad things that may happen in our doors. February 2017, the committee puts forth Administrative Order 2017-015, which adopted a host of security and training standards. We basically said, you can do whoever you want to do for training, but they're going to make these performance objectives. Second piece, which is what made our program successful, we established a funding stream. How many of you have ever had a mandate come down from either AOC or someone else? Hey, you do this. Well, where's the money? Oh, you figured it out. We knew out of the gate if we did that, we were screwed. So we attached some funding to it. JCEF, Judicial Collection Enhancement Fund. That supports my program to this day. JCEF monies come down and we use them in two different pots of money. They support my team, my payroll, my training venue, all of it. Plus, we also completed a grant program using that funding. So every year, we have what's called a Court Security Improvement Grant. It's a pot of money, $250,000, sometimes $400,000. And every year, courts can apply for grant funding. I need window tint. He needs cameras. She needs ballistic protection on the bench. You need more cameras and more server space. So courts can apply for this every year, and once we deem that it's an appropriate allocation, we'll actually give them the money to fulfill that security requirement. The JCEF funding is critical. It's also one of the biggest hurdles that I think most courts encounter. So I'm going to ask that overhead question. How many of you have either had success or run into a major hurdle when it comes down to funding your security initiatives? Anybody willing to share a story? Do we have a mic available?
Yes, we do.
Just a real quick snippet. Give me a story of how you were successful in finding funding, or you're running into a roadblock and you can't figure it out. Anybody? I saw hands. I know I did. There's one.
So I'm from Michigan, and several years ago, there was a shooting in Berrien County in which 2 court officers were killed. And in my court, we're just a small 2-judge court. We transport our prisoners through the back hallway by the judge's chambers. We have a really sophisticated red light system that we turn on and off when the prisoners are coming through. I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate. And it scares me. We have just court officers that are only within the authority of the judge. And the roadblock we hit when I ask for funding to put some safeguards in place is our funding unit. They won't fund it. They just flat out don't see the reason to do it. There are other departments that need more money, and we can't do it. It's been 10 years, and
You're fighting for the same pot of money.
We're all fighting for the same pot of money. And there's other grants, like we have Michigan Municipal Risk Association grant, and so we can get those for smaller amounts that improve communication. But some of those basic fundamental things that would keep us safe, I just don't have the money for it.
Are the headlines, this is a bad way of asking the question, but I'm going to throw it out there. Are the headlines helping? The violence and so forth that...
Honestly, I mean, I'm like, that scares me to death. That's our setup in our courthouse.
Right. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Sir?
Well, we run into similar situations where the funding authority, for us, it's the county. Because there hasn't been a major incident to occur in a long time, that surely we're okay. And we have a number of events. We're a fairly busy operator. We bring in about 5,000 people a day. And we have a number of firearms that they get through. And part of that is because the X-ray machines are sort of not that good. And so, trying to get those replaced has been like an act of Congress.
Yep.
Because they're like, well, no one's shot up our courthouse before. Yep. So, is it really that big of a deal? Come back and ask in 6 months. And that 6 months, quite frankly, has been years. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I hate to say it, but the headlines are driving this. And there was a comment that was made. It came up last year. One of my faculty members made it. And the background is this. We, through our academy program, we have officers that come through every 8 weeks. They have to go through our basic training program. And we do an entire day on screening and wanding, how to do it properly so you don't miss stuff. We historically have officers that go too fast. Like they wave this wand around like it's a bleeping lightsaber, right? You've seen them, right? So they miss stuff. We know they miss stuff because we intentionally put role players through and we hide stuff on the role players. We get in blades, we get in knives, we get in drugs. Why did you miss it? Because my sergeant gets upset if I go too slow. Why'd you miss it? Because my judge gets upset if there's a line down the sidewalk. And the faculty literally stood there and stared at him, and he caught me off guard. Was his exact response verbatim. Give me an excuse that the wife of the dead judge is going to accept. And he just stared at him, and there was deaf silence in the room. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm hearing that same response to the folks that aren't willing to give you money to secure your courts. Give me an excuse that the family of the dead clerk will accept for why I couldn't get a new x-ray machine. I hate to say it, it's blunt, it's slightly abrasive, but it's the world we live in. I've had courts that have used all the headlines as a mechanism to get funding because they proved, here's what can happen, here's our duty to provide a safe work environment for our staff and our customers, and now the impetus is on you. All right. So we've got the AO, we've got some funding streams, we've got the grant program. Lessons learned, stakeholders from courts of all sizes were critical to establishing the buy-in. When we formed that committee, we just didn't get the biggest courts in the state. We got little court, medium court, big court, because we needed all of that voice. And that's kind of how we established the buy-in right out of the gate. March of 2019, court security training specialist is hired. So, look at my timeline. 2017, the AO was signed, thou shall, training academy, standards, assessment. And in March of 2019, I walk in the door 2 years after the fact. Chief Justice Bale's strategic agenda was expiring in June. That's March. My mandate was pretty simple. Hey, you've got to create a program. Actually, it's a training academy. And we got a couple hundred officers already in the field. You need to get them ready to go and start up by June. Okay? Okay, sure. I started drinking heavily. So, first marching order, get the pilot. Once the pilot was launched, then we could say we fulfilled that strategic agenda item. Because again, Chief Justice Bales was getting ready to leave. We need to fulfill that strategic agenda item. So we did get the pilot launched. We did make it in time. Lesson learned here, if you're going to have folks involved in running the program, get them in the door early. There were things that committee did that were outstanding, but there were a few things that I'd have probably been standing up with my hair on fire going, hey, hold on, stop. Let's think this through. The good news is we did get it accomplished. June of 2019, Court Security Officer Academy pilot was delivered, leveraged curriculum and instructors from a partner court. Participants included key security leads from across the branch. So when I walked in March of 2019, some of my success was already set up for me. And what I mean by that, they had a contractual relationship with the largest superior court in the state who also had their own academy. So I was able to piggyback some of their curriculum and I was able to piggyback some of their instructors to get that pilot launched. Now, anytime you're inheriting somebody else's program, there's always changes you want to make, all right? There's things you want to personalize. There's things you think that make this a world-class program even better. So we launched through it. The voice of customer was a huge component in critiquing the content. What we literally did is we launched that pilot and we brought in leads from all across the state. Hey, I need you to sit through this program for 5 days. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what sucked. And we're going to help change it. The relationship with the larger superior court allowed for accelerated rollout, but that same relationship caused a little bit of a hindrance. Show of hands, who here is from a medium or small size court? There you go. How do you feel when big courts walk in the room and like, why aren't you doing it our way?
No.
right? I got 500 employees. What do you mean you can't get this done tomorrow? And that was part and parcel of the problem, is that I had smaller courts coming through the program, and they walk into the biggest court in the state, and the biggest court in the state's doing stuff pretty well, right? But then they go back to their court, they got limited funding, they got limited resources, so it was a little bit of a dynamic where I had to temper it really quick to say, hey, here are the standards, this is an AOC program. We happen to be hosting in this large court because it allows us to get the program rolling and rolling quickly. June of 2019, HB 1064. While we're doing all of this training and all this cool stuff, we still didn't have any authority. Court security officers that work for the judicial branch had no more authority than Joe Citizen. Show of hands, how many of your judicial branch marshals or CSOs have legal authority in your state? Notice that there are only 3 hands. So we realized very quickly out of the gate, we're going to give these judicial branch officers authority, okay, to do their job. The original bill was written before I got there, hint, hint. The original bill designated CSOs as peace officers.
Interesting.
Let that sit for a minute. It said judicial branch court security officers would be designated in statute as peace officers. What do you think the problem was with that? Anybody? Judicial branch CSOs as peace officers. Yes?
They didn't belong to a law enforcement organization. I mean, like our sheriff is the one in, sorry. I mean, generally, peace officers need to belong to either a police chief or a constable or a sheriff or some entity that is a law enforcement agency.
Yes.
So then they can get both trained and certified and follow all of that. In Texas, the sheriff is the keeper of the courthouse. So they are all peace officers because they're under the sheriff's purview.
Yeah, no, excellent point. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a more tidbit of a backstory. I'm hired in March. The legislators are holding committee meetings on this bill. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do a peace officer certification academy, which typically runs about 6 months. Can you imagine if I tell your judge I need a CSO for 6 months? Not going to happen, right? So I'm worried about that. So we walk into this committee meeting, and citizens begin to show up. Normally, when you have a committee meeting and citizens show up, it's a red flag. Something's going to happen here. Sure enough, they did. And the very first citizen that stood up to the podium opened my eyes in ways that I did not anticipate. And their opposition to that bill sounded a lot like this. I do not want judges to have their private police department. Stopped me in my tracks. Then the next person got up and said, wait a minute, this is not the way it's supposed to work. And I'm scratching my head. Executive, legislative, judicial. Can you imagine if the judicial branch has its own peace officers working the front door? Think about it. You come through the front door, you got a gun, you got a knife, you got drugs. The judicial branch CSO makes the arrest. Who's going to determine the legality of the arrest? Oops. And that's what the citizens' problem was. They're like, wait a minute, executive, judicial, you don't get to do the same thing. Plus, they had a problem with citizens walking into the courthouse wearing a uniform that would represent the same department that made the arrest. I'm walking in to Phoenix Municipal Court. There's a Phoenix police officer there controlling my access to justice. Hey, sir, thank you. Empty your pockets, take your knives out. I'll be on the stand to testify you get in about 5 minutes. It's not supposed to work that way. So the good news is it was signed into law, but barely. And when I say barely, I mean barely. It was the last day of the legislative session. Governor Ducey signed it, and the bill got reworked on the 11th hour. Gave our CSOs the ability to detain, not arrest, use force, all that good stuff, pending the arrival of law enforcement who will determine if there was probable cause to make a arrest. That's how we cleaned it up. Does it work well for us? So far, so good. We need to tweak it a little bit because it's limited to 3 specific areas. CSOs have authority in judicial branch grounds, judicial branch facility, or where courts are convening. The lawmakers were very adamant in the fact that we're going to give CSOs the ability to use force and make lawful detentions, but only in those 3 areas. What didn't work there is that we have a lot of officers doing personal security details, taking the judge to dinners, to speaking engagements. So when those CSOs are outside of the confines of the judicial branch facility, they have no more authority than Joe Citizen. So eventually I see us reworking that law to give them a little bit more authority. We're just not quite there yet. And again, it reinforced that judicial branch officers are not peace officers, which works relatively well for us. Quick overhead question so we can stay on time. Does anybody else have that same dynamic where you're struggling because you have peace officers working the front door, but you also have peace officers in the courts making testimony and so forth? Does anybody have a different dynamic or one that works for you? Good, bad? Okay. All right, that was easy. Lessons learned: maintain a clear, distinct separation of powers, no grandfathering process. All CSOs and bailiffs who perform the court security mission need to meet the same standards. This is the way the phone calls worked. And some of you, this may sound very familiar. Hey, is this Mike? Yes, Judge. I've got Bob working court security. Bob is awesome. Everyone loves him. He's great with the customers. But I'm looking at this academy thing, and you got like defensive tactics and punching and what? Yes, Judge. Bob can't do any of that. Bob needs a stool because Bob's knees hurt. I can't make these conversations up. They occurred. So can we just, let Bob ignore all that? 1001, 1002, 1003. No, Judge, I'm sorry, we can't. No grandfathering. And that was a little bit of a sticking point for us. And it's like that anytime you create certification and training standards, you're creating a line in the sand. And you may have folks that have been on the job for years. Yeah, uh-oh.
I do have a question
Yeah.
because you raise an interesting point. I was wondering if you've partnered with your court education as part of like a judicial conclave or court staff training to incorporate like personal defense or just safety assessments, like, just making sure you're being vigilant and looking out for yourself in these kinds of circumstances.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, that's further on in the
Okay.
deck. I like where you're thinking now.
Okay.
So, what happened to Bob? Well, Bob found a job elsewhere. I hate to say it. It's an abrasive answer. But when the bad persons are showing up at your door, is Bob going to help you? No. No, Bob's not going to help. All right? We love Bob to death. I felt bad. Sometimes Bob's had to go down the road or find other jobs. But the lack of grandfathering was critical to our success because we basically said, here's the line in the sand. We need you to pass these standards in order to work for the courts. Because I need you, and you to get home safely. And I can't do that if Bob's at the front door. September 2019, we went live with the Court Security Officer Academy, trying to get all hundreds of officers through while also maintaining pace with the turnover. But we screwed up the faculty to student ratio. I'm trying to pack hundreds of officers through while they're still meeting turnover demands, and I've got too much content and not enough time. We also, hand in hand with that, launched all of these code requirements. These are in your handout material, so I'm not going to do a deep dive here, but I would highly recommend if you have any potential or any thoughts of standardizing your court security or even just looking at your hardened facilities, take a look at these links in the handout because these are what we created to allow courts to standardize across the board. Court security standards, like I talked about earlier, duress buttons, window tint, ballistic protection, all of that good stuff is enumerated in that section. CSO powers and duties basically breaks down what CSOs that work for judicial branch can and can't do. Personnel practices. I know this is going to shock you, right? We had courts that would hire people without doing a background check. Shocking, right? Wait, it gets worse. Do you have a gun at home? Yes, sir. Can you bring it to work? Oh, I'm telling you, this is why I have all the gray. So we said right out of the gate, background check. polygraph, go pee in a cup, criminal history, all of the things that you would expect that would be done for court security officers to work in the judicial branch. We put it in code, now it's a shall. You don't get to choose. Training and certification basically says that every CSO in the state has to come through our program within 90 days. We try and make it 60, but we have to get them through in 90 days. Use of force. Remember, they're detaining, they're not arresting. So our use of force differs a little bit from law enforcement. We also have varying or lack thereof of case law because our statutory authority is only a few years old. Firearms, yes, we specify what type of weapon you have to carry. Rude, I know. Officers just, what do you mean I can't carry my Desert Eagle Colt Python? Yes, you can't. What about my 6-shot revolver? No. We specify the type of ammunition, we specify the type of weapon, and the standardization. And all we're doing is following law enforcement best practices that have been around for decades. Why do you carry the same weapon? Because it's easier to train. Everybody knows active knowledge about how to use the weapon. And if, God forbid, I have an active shooter and I run out of bullets, I know I can go right into his belt and get some more bullets because they're going to fit in my gun. So we standardize that across the board. Tasers, we allow officers to carry tasers, but we dictate what type. Lessons learned, uniform code requirements were critical to our success. Adoption wasn't going to happen overnight, but grant funding made things a lot easier. Sure does. Money, money, money. CSO Firearm Academy. Before we launched this program, officers were basically at their wits' end trying to figure out how to get certified to carry a weapon. You used to be an NRA instructor, right? Yeah, sure, years ago. Okay, cool. Can you train my officers to carry a firearm? Sure, no problem. And that's the way it was because they didn't have any other tools. Didn't have any other tools. So we took control of the program. We do it firearm training and we use train the trainer. Those instructors and faculty are actually occurring this week down in Florence, Arizona. Once AOC took over the arming initiative, guess what courts started to do now? Go armed. Because now they didn't have to worry about who was going to train them, who was going to tell them what kind of weapon to carry, who's going to tell them what kind of gun to carry. AOC took care of it, so now more courts are going armed. They're also going armed because they read the headlines. We have a lot of very uncomfortable conversations going on in Arizona, and I'm going to ask the same question of you here in a minute. We still have courts. Again, we're non-unified. We're not centralized. So we give the presiding judge the ability of determining whether their officers will or will not carry a firearm. Now, the number who are carrying a firearm is increasing every year, but we still have some judges that, good, bad, or indifferent, yeah, you know what? The police department's right on the other side of the plaza over there, so we'll call them if we need them. During an active shooter event, how long does it generally take before you know what starts happening? Anybody?
Less than a minute.
Less than a minute. Yep. Some actual statistics out of the Secret Service put it right around 30 seconds, depending on the type of facility. If it's not a hardened facility, generally within 30 seconds, we're going to have bodies hitting the ground. So think about that for a minute. How long does it take you to call 911 or hit the duress button, get the police department to get in their car, to get to your building, to be able to respond to the shooter? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? So now courts are going armed, and we're seeing that number grow exponentially. Question for you on that note. How many of you, good, bad, or indifferent, how many of you have unarmed CSOs working in your courts? Unarmed. Okay? What's your conversation? What's your, again, I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just interested in what feedback you have. Why have your courts decided to deploy armed or unarmed? Right, hands I saw? Yes, right here. Here.
I'm actually with a tribal court in California, and we do have unarmed court security officers, but we also have a contract with the local county sheriffs.
Okay.
And we have them come in on days of our hearings.
Okay, so you have an armed presence,
Armed during
law enforcement.
during hearings.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Another hand, please. A little bit more feedback. I saw hands, I know. As soon as the mic comes out, everybody's like, nope, wasn't me. All right, I won't pick. Okay. Oh, there it is. I was doing good, right? I was like, I got my academy rolling. I got firearms going on. Life is starting to get better. My hair was starting to come back. Then this thing hit. Shortly thereafter, Governor Ducey issued a state of emergency, shut down our operations from top to bottom. Did we sit on our laurels? No. In fact, we took advantage of this 3 months that we were shut down to basically fix all of those things that I talked about that were a problem right out of the gate. We transferred all academy operations to the Judicial Education Center. I work under the auspices of the Judicial Education Center. So we loved that big court to death, but it was getting to be a logistical challenge because I needed space. I needed all of the things that I couldn't do operating out of somebody else's space. So we brought our entire operations over to the JEC. Yeah, I was still struggling with getting space with, judges training and clerks training, but it was a lot easier to run out of a space that I can control. We revamped the curriculum and we pushed the crap online that we didn't need to do in person. So if you're doing any sort of training and you've ever used a hybrid learning model, you understand what I'm about to say. It's the best thing since sliced bread. Because I had this much stuff to fit into 5 days. So during COVID, we're like, nope, pushed it online. So now when the officers show up for the academy, they've already completed 24 hours of training online. So when they show up, I get to worry about the meat and potato stuff, the stuff that's going to keep them and their courts alive. January 2021, continuing education were initiated. Who here, show of hands, has a requirement that your judicial branch employees complete a certain number of hours of continuing education every year? Show of hands. Every year you got to do annual training. We have COJET. Crap, what's it? Committee on Judicial Education and Training. Look at that, I remembered it. Every year, every judicial branch employee has to do 16 hours of COJET. The problem was for court security officers, guess how much continuing education class was out there for them? 0 to 0. They ended up taking classes on like filing fees and, just so they could get their hours. So we took care of that. We launched continuing education classes every year. Every certified officer in the state of Arizona goes online and they complete training, use of force updates, ethical considerations, de-escalation strategies, customer service, everything that we taught them at the initial, now they get to go through and do it again every year. What are some of the other ones we launched? Narcan, opioid overdose, that sort of stuff. All that's online for them. Lesson learned, there were scarce opportunities for CSOs. The problem was I screwed up. I didn't make it mandatory. You figure if they got to do 16 hours and I'm giving them training that applies to their job, I probably don't need to make it mandatory, right?
Lesson learned.
Yeah, apparently I should have said thou shalt. I assumeth too mucheth. So eventually we're probably going to end up making it mandatory. So every time we put out a course, take this course, and they'll get it done. January 21, Court Security Guard Academy. Oh, my best intentions, biggest failure in 7 years. It's intended for private security vendors and volunteers who provide court security. Remember I said earlier that we give courts the ability to make that decision? We still have courts that are using VetSec, Allied, all the other folks. Those folks receive absolutely zero training in court security before they show up at the front door. So we launched the Guard Academy. It was great intentions. I thought I was doing an awesome job. Come to find out, I was full of it. Because what happens is the failure rate for that program hovers between 14 to 30%. 14 to 30% is my failure rate. This program is only 3 days long. Nothing more than de-escalation, customer service, screening, DT, and oh my gosh, wait for it, use of force, all right? Been carrying a firearm for 10 years. Please tell me you know how to use it. First class, very first class. How everybody does the intros, like, hi, I'm so-and-so, hi, I'm so-and-so. He was sitting in the third row. I know exactly where he was to this day. I'm so-and-so, and I've been doing armed private security for 15 years. Failed the written test with a score of 40%. Sat in class for 3 days. I had world-class faculty training him and the other in the room on when you could use deadly force, when you could not use deadly force. They don't have any authority, just training them on when you can do this and that. Failed the written test. It has maintained that status throughout the duration of the program. So this is what's causing my faculty and the folks that work with me to throw me off of a bridge on a daily basis. Because when we know this program is coming up, everybody starts getting sad. Here's the good news. Here's the good news. Courts are fixing the problem for me. They're realizing the threats are too big and bad right now. I can't get away with using VetSec anymore, or Allied, or whatever vendor it is. I'm not picking on those ones, but I can't get away with using a private vendor who has no authority and who I can't control. Because remember, these folks are working on their own policy. They're working under their own guidelines, not the courts. So if you want them to do something a certain way, now you've got to revamp a contract, go through 6 months of negotiations and all the other stuff, versus a judicial branch CSO that works for you, can control with you, and can protect your court. So I imagine if I show up here in a couple of years, that program probably will not be in existence. High turnover, high training costs, fit for duty, adult learning challenges, are they up to the task? I think that's an open-ended question for now.
Yep.
DT, train-the-trainer program. We wanted courts to be able to do their own train-the-trainer program for their defensive tactics officers. That one's been a rousing success so far. Provide local ability to maintain critical skills, annual refresher training not required by code. This is the one where I talked about you need to do it every year, and I assumed that they would. Do courts like to share information between other courts? I heard a no. Where's it at? Thank you. I don't know what it is. My law enforcement world, we share, like, hey, here's who's wanted, here's where he's living, here's where she's living. Courts, oh my gosh. It's like you can be one court next to the other and they don't talk to each other. I don't know what it is, but we're getting better. We're getting better. How did we get better? We created a listserv. So every CSO that graduates from our programs gets added to a listserv. Every judge and every court administrator who wants to be on that listserv just enrolls. Every week, I send out intelligence. Here's what happened in this court. Here's what happened in this court. Be on the lookout for this dude because he threatened a judge and he might be on your docket. We send all of that information out on the listserv. Courts love it. Judges love it. It's an easy information sharing network. I will tell you that on the national level, however, we're still struggling. We're still struggling. There are some initiatives in the works with sharing intel and threat gathering databases that are in the works in the federal level. We hope to be successful with that at some point. Does anybody have a similar information sharing network in your state where you share information? Yes? Is it a similar model? Oh, Mike's coming. Mike's coming.
In New Jersey, they have JSmart where they share information. We file incident reports and it's shared among law
Perfect.
enforcement.
Love it. Thank you. Love the incident report. Do I have another hand up front? Oh, making it work for it.
In Washington State, we have a couple of different listservs as well, and a incident report with AOC that we submit, and there's report outs with that as well.
Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love the incident reporting. We're seeing more branches do that. From the intel perspective, it's awesome and allows you to calculate and, more importantly, quantify. So when courts are looking for more money, now you've got hard data to show what's going on in your state. I love it. Excellent. Good. Court Security Assessment Program. So way back when the codes were launched, there was a requirement that said courts shall have a security assessment every 3 years. It didn't say who had to do them. So guess what was happening when the 3 years were up? Oh, our assessment's done. Okay, who's going to do it today? I'll do it. All right, you're going to do our assessment? Yeah, sure, I'll assess myself. And that's the way it looked. And it wasn't wrong because we never said, yeah, you know what, have somebody else do it, please. So we did it. I didn't want to throw an unfunded mandate out there and say you got to have somebody else come in because those assessment services are expensive. So what did we do? We just started doing it ourselves. So now AOC, my team, goes out and does a security assessment for your court. Absolutely no cost. We observe all the travel. We observe per diem. We simply show up. We do an all-day assessment, give you a report, and your boxes are checked and life is good. What's the benefit of having outside eyes coming into your court and looking around? What's the benefit? Yes, yes.
He said impartiality.
Yep, exactly.
For those that didn't hear.
Exactly. When you work in a facility day in and day out, you just start to not see stuff. And then when we showed up, there was a lot of head scratching moments like, yeah, I don't know why that thing is there, but we'll fix it. So having an outside assessment is a valuable, valuable tool. We underestimated the depth of vulnerabilities within the branch. And I think the courts underestimated their vulnerabilities as well until we started showing up. But again, we didn't just show up and say, fix it. We showed up and said, here's the grant application to help you fix it. Here's our new training venue. I mentioned that we moved into Judicial Education Center. We also moved into a new space within the JEC that allows us to basically piggyback with probation. So now we have CSOs doing everything in a one-stop shop, from lecture to defensive tactics to actually practicing on screening. Helps us meet the turnover and helps us keep up with the court turnover and training demands. The center was created. And the reason the center was created was basically at the auspices of Chief Justice Ann Scott Timmer. She realized that court security training and education was starting to go into tentacles that it was never intended. It was all good, but it was never really intended to do everything it was doing. So she wanted to bring it under the branding of the center. So far, so good on this. It's been a really, really positive breakthrough for us. Training and education touches virtually every aspect of the mission. Mission creep is real and shouldn't be anticipated. And here's what I mean by the mission creep. January 2026, our mailroom opened up a package. Inside the package was a greeting card with no specific addressee, also several vials of clear liquid. Ruh-roh. Guess how much training our mailroom staff had in interpreting
0.
and stopping suspicious packages? Okay. Took it up to the CSO on duty. At some point, the red button was hit. Department of Public Services, hazmat, bomb unit. We shut down our entire judicial branch Supreme Court facility for the duration of the day. The testing on the liquid was presumptive positive for an explosive liquid. Now, here's the good part. We didn't have the rest of the components. If you've ever had IED training, bomb training, got to have a trigger, got to have a power source, got to have all those things to go with it. All we had was the liquid. We had the explosive. Don't get me wrong, it was a bad day, right? But if it went boom, not much was going to happen except the box going boom. But think it didn't wake up everyone else in the building. So we started launching some other initiatives that were not necessarily designed solely for court security officers. We rolled out training to court staff and judicial officers, judges. Security awareness training. Every year we bring all of our folks in for AOC and we talk about what to do when you're at home, what to do when you're in public, what to do when you're having a package delivered, all of the things to keep the judicial branch staff safe. Because here's what we noticed. You may have noticed the same thing. We're doing a great job of protecting all our judges. Do our bad people that want to hurt us care if they kill a judge or care if they kill a court administrator? As far as they're concerned, you all work for the what? The courts. One target's hardened, hard to get to. Other target, not so much. So we had to start rolling out the training for court staff as well. Question for you. Are the threats against the branch affecting your turnover at your courts? Yes or no? Are your folks, is your turnover rate, I see a head shake, are the threats against the courts causing your courts to have a higher turnover number than you think they normally would if we weren't in the headlines?
Thank you. Yes, we've had, I'm here in Albuquerque, we're at the 2nd Judicial District Court, and so we're the busiest court in the state, although Metro Court sometimes tries to dispute us for that honor. And on a daily basis, we have individuals and really our frontline staff are the people that bear the brunt of threats, of disrespect. I get security incident reports that are automatically generated to me and sent to the AOC on almost a daily basis, sometimes 2 or 3 a day, and it's that staff that's getting the threats and the disrespectful behavior.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of other places they can go. And these are people that really join the court, I think, just to try to be good public servants, and it gets to be too much.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else have training designed for your court staff? Like just training on how to be situationally aware? Yes? Excellent. Did I see another hand over here? Okay, please. Yeah. Thank you.
So we haven't had turnover because of they feel unsafe, but I did have an applicant in an interview ask me, what type of security do you have on non-court days?
Yes. Yes. They're cognizant of it, right? They read the headlines, they see the news broadcast as well.
So
I wasn't sure how court staff were going to take and receive the training we were given because it was basically, hey, let's put together this training for court staff on security awareness. They loved it. They wanted more of it. They're like, keep doing this more frequently if you can, because the more information they had, the safer they felt in the building.
Mike, we have somebody participating online.
Okay.
I asked what their biggest lesson learned was, and they said, it's always fluid and we must keep adapting. And as far as it affecting the turnover, Beth is at an appellate court, so she doesn't see it so much there, but she knows that it's happening at the trial court levels.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing. As a police officer, my son, when he was around 14 or 15, he started getting very quiet in public. Like he would just not be himself when we were in a public space. And I realized that I never had the conversation with him. I never had that uncomfortable conversation of, Dad is a police officer, we're going to be in public, we're going to encounter people that I arrested, and you're going to be going to school with children of people that I arrested. I never had a conversation with him. I avoided it. And once I had that conversation, he became more comfortable in his space. I think there's a parallel there with the court staff. We can't ignore it. We have to acknowledge it. But the more conversation we have, the more I think they feel prepared and equipped to do their job.
I would totally agree. I have recently at the Supreme Court, we had a Supreme Court Safety Day at the New Mexico Supreme Court. And I was like looking around and observing, and a lot of people under stress, they're not prepared to act quickly and take care of themselves. And like the reaction on some of the videos that we watched, people's first instinct was just to hide and like cower, and they were just such an easy target. But you could tell in the audience and with our court staff, and it was just that training was so invaluable and appreciated, and people really wanted to be engaged in this kind of training.
Yeah. Sometimes I think just sharing the fear helps alleviate it. Perfect. Thank you.
We have something here.
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
So we're public servants, and one of the questions that my staff poses is when folks on the phone want to know their name, and they continue to want to ask, well, can I give them a fake name? And hence, we're public servants. It's public record. And so how do you support your staff with that context, their safety, and any suggestions on that?
We actually put that information, excellent question. One of the initiatives we rolled out is First Amendment auditor training for court staff. Who here has ever dealt with an auditor? Wow, yeah, holy crap. We're being recorded, so I'm gonna leave it there. We put out a class and that specific question came up. And our answer is very simple. You are not obligated under any Arizona statute, rule, or code to provide any personal information in the course of your duties. Done.
So in New Mexico, we have a lot of requests for Information of Public Records Act requests, and they can ask for a list of your employee names. We do not recommend giving a fake name.
Correct. And let me clarify, thank you for bringing that up. I'm talking about face-to-face encounters. Obviously, they can file a FOIA request, get salary information and so forth, but when I'm encountered with somebody who is intentionally escalating the situation, we shut it down. In fact, one of our requirements in Arizona is to have a physical barrier at all customer service windows that allows you to basically shut down the dialogue. They can stand there and argue with the window blind all they want, but you've gone to lunch 20 minutes ago.
So then what would you tell your staff how to respond? What would be the response then that you could give to help shut that down?
Disengage and summon court security. That is our
But if you're on the phone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And the person's saying, well, I need to know your name, give me your name. What would be a response then if you're saying, I advise staff, you're not required to give the name. How would you respond?
terminate the call. Do not allow the call to escalate. Everything we're trying to do is maintain or de-escalate. If that caller is intentionally attempting to escalate the encounter, our employees are under absolutely no obligation to continue that dialogue. The threats are too real. The threats are too real. I would rather deal with an irate customer who I can explain why they didn't get the information they wanted than have you give your name. All of a sudden now they're on the web and they're showing up at your house. Hope that response worked. Excellent questions. Thank you. Yep, there we go.
One issue that we have is that our employees' names are on all kinds of documents that are filed into the record. And we've had people call and they can find information about that person because their name it's on the seal, they're the clerk. Right. And they may not be the person that they're even angry at, but they find that information and it's very easy to do things like docs, all kinds of things. And it's an issue for keeping employees if they feel afraid because their name is on everything.
Correct. Do any of the courts here offer web scrubbing services to your employees and your staff? Just
To the judges.
Judicial? Okay. Yeah. There are web scrubbing services out there, and we do have a contract with them in Arizona. It's still subscription-based, but I have seen a lot of non-judicial officers opt into that service for that very same reason. Good. Excellent. Thank you. How am I for time?
We're probably needing to wrap it up.
All right, good. We are wrapping it up. Judicial Officer DT training. Remember I talked about the mission creep? If you've ever had a good day and can't believe you're getting paid to do this, give defensive tactics training to judges. It is the best thing going.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We had our second class about 2 weeks ago. We rolled it out, right? Hey, free DT training, not mandatory. You don't pass, you don't fail. But we show you how to punch, block, kick, escape if somebody grabs you from behind, escape if somebody gets on top of you. We teach them all that. And then, because the day's not good enough yet, we teach them how to use Repulse self-defense spray. Have you ever seen it? It's like OC spray. And we even give them a free can when they graduate. Yeah. I've got a mark here. We did a ground fighting, and I had a judge. She was a little quieter, a little bit reserved, and that's always the problem for me because they always flip that switch, right? She did a hip thrust. I landed on the side of the wall. It was an awesome day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're running this program. If you want any information on it, feel free to let it out. It's great. The judges love it so far. Assessor training program, we're running this in May. I talked about AOC doing these security assessments. We're actually going to train officers to do home security assessments. So the homes of the judges can now be assessed absolutely free of charge. We've done 3 of them so far. An assessor will show up. Shrubs, window, lighting, alarms, cameras, crime in your area. It's all free of charge, and we'll do it for every judge in the branch that wants one. Final thoughts. So when I first started, my director, Jeff Schrade, it was about month 6 or so, and I was stepping on a lot of toes, right? I mean, I was peeing people off. And I finally came in and I'd done something else where somebody who had just thought that they, knew better said no, and we got into it. And he said, well, Mike, you're an agitator. And at this point, I'm like trying to figure out if my pension's going to pay my food bill, because that's not normally a compliment. And it was. I didn't realize it until he explained it. It was a compliment. And what he meant by that is you need to be the loudest, squeakiest wheel in the room if you actually want to make change happen. So I'm going to, before we open it up here for any more Q&A, my ask of you is this. If there are things going on in your court facility that you know need to be fixed, if there are things that make you feel unsafe to coming to work every day, you got to be that agitator. Yeah, Nobody's going to like it. No, we don't care. All right? The threats are real. They're evolving. They're escalating. Every time you see a judge being threatened on the news, there are 100 potential threats out there wanting to be a copycat. Every time we have a judge who receives a pizza order that they didn't order, that is a threat. I know where you live, I know where your name, and I know your kids' names, but guys, I sent the pizza to your home in your child's name. Every time that happens, you need to be the agitator at your court saying, what are we doing to prevent this from happening here? And if you have any questions on how to be an agitator, reach out. I'm in Arizona. If they want to come yell at me, take a number. Anything to go to the order.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mike, for this very informative presentation. I think all of our courts can benefit from today, but just this has been outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Question?
Hi, so I work in Pima County. I'm just curious, one of the issues that we're dealing with turnover with CSOs is the pay.
Yep.
There are a lot of expectations as far as the training and things, and the standard is being, it's rising, right? As far as what they need to be capable of doing and what their education is.
Yep.
The turnover that we're experiencing with CSOs is just, the pay is just not enough. Are there things being done in Arizona to try to address that?
Pay scales. The Arizona Association of State Superior Court Administrators put out a salary study about 2 years ago, and they dispersed it statewide. So basically, you put courts on notice. Here's what this county's paying. Here's what this county's paying. And if you ain't matching it, you're going to continue to bleed CSOs. The highest paying courts in our branch generally tend to be the municipal courts. Surprise, Buckeye, all of those folks, they are basically pilfering officers from your court and everyone else's because they're up here. Once courts address that, then I think the turnover numbers will stop. We have to pay folks with the understanding that they're going to be expected to deal with an active shooter at the front door. And if we don't pay them commensurate with that responsibility, we're going to continue to lose them. Yeah, good question. Good question. I think we're getting there, but it's creeping.
We have 15 more minutes, so we have a couple more questions.
Oh, good.
Okay.
See, I did talk fast enough.
I'm curious because you talked about that Arizona's given presiding judges a lot of choice in terms of who they utilize, what type of court security they utilize. How many employees does AOC have? Is this funding coming from the legislature, or is this kind of county funding piecemeal for paying the court security officer specifically?
And make sure I'm tracking your question correctly. Are you asking me who's actually funding the CSOs or who's funding the training piece? I apologize.
Who's funding the CSOs?
The individual municipality, county, city, or local. That's the part that we were talking about in Pima County. Some counties are ahead of the curve. Some counties are still treating us like folks who don't get expected to catch bullets, and it's not going to continue to work that way.
And I will mention that sometimes in your appellate courts, there is not a county that provides that kind of level of funding. So sometimes you have to work really closely with your court leadership and with the legislature to be able to have that level of appellate court security.
Right. There's a comment that comes up occasionally during assessments. When we're doing security assessments, a lot of times I'll have to deal with municipal stakeholders, the city manager, the county manager, who basically court security is just another line item for them. And the phrase which sometimes can come up is you can either pay a little now for good service or you can pay a lot later when you provided an unsafe work environment. They don't want to hear it, and that's that agitator moment, right? But we have to say it because that's the world we live in. Yes.
So the way our county works is the sheriff's office by statute is designated as the primary security provider for the courts. So I'm curious, I don't know if you have that in Arizona. If you touched on it, I missed you saying that, but how would you work in a court security officer with a sheriff's department?
Excellent question, thank you. Most of the courts in Arizona utilize the sheriffs for prisoner transport and security within the courtroom for in-custody hearings. As far as the facility, screening, perimeter, all of the other responsibilities, they fall on judicial branch CSOs. Yes. And they work hand in hand. We have a lot of courts where the sheriff's department handles all the transport aspects, and then court security is responsible for security of the facility itself. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Mike, we have a question here.
I have a question.
All right, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah, have you had to deal with making a protocol for ICE officers? One time they came to our court building and they were more disruptive than anything else.
I don't want to say anything that's going to jinx my entire branch. So far, so good. And the reason I say that is there was a memorandum cut by our ICE office in Arizona several years ago that basically said we are not going to conduct activities in or around a courthouse facility. So far, that's been holding well. Good question. Thank you.
So to get creative with the funding source, one of the things I've been working on with the captain of our corrections is doing a special assignment CSO position that allows us to bring in some executive functions. So it makes it a little more convenient for defendants when they need to be fingerprinted or DNA swabbed, where it's a one-stop shop for them. So I don't know if that's going to work. It's going to be a different type of layout than I think any court has done before, but we're hoping it'll be more of an efficient process for not only financially, but for the stakeholders involved.
Yeah, do me a favor, my email contact, let me know how that works out. Because I've had courts asking about similar models, and I would love to know how your experience worked. Thank you. Over here.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your opinion on outside law enforcement coming into the court to testify with bringing their firearm in or not. Had a lot of situations with that.
So we're not the friendliest people in the world when it comes into outside firearms. We allow law enforcement to bring a weapon in if the presiding judge allows it by administrative order and they are an official business, i.e. they're testifying in a hearing. If a law enforcement officer is coming in a judicial branch facility and they're not specifically on official business for subpoena or whatever, they are treated like every other citizen. The firearm doesn't make it past the front door. Good question. Thank you. Yeah. And again, in the handout material, are those codes broken down? And it talks about all of the things like firearm restrictions. I would encourage you to go through that. They're only about a few pages long each, but there are a lot of information out there that we honestly stole from other courts. And we call it a case study, copy and steal everything. So if I find yours, it's mine now. Right? I may change the letterhead. I may not, but now it's mine. Feel free to do the same thing.
So those handouts are in the app down at the bottom of the session information. Way at the top on the same session, please rate and make comments on this session.
Steelers roll, that's a 5-star, right? Dang, I'm not winning you over.
I work in a courthouse, I should say, that has no security.
Ooh.
Wow. We have 2 judges that are pushing very hard for it, but we have a sheriff who has no appetite for it and doesn't see the need because nothing's happened.
Yet.
So how do you handle a sheriff like that?
So your situation is not unusual for me as well, and I'll tell you the reason. There's a snippet in our code requirement that basically says courts that do not have court on a frequent basis, i.e. maybe once every 2 weeks, are not required to have court security. The problem is we have people walking straight from the parking lot into the courtroom with absolutely no screening. The judges are educating themselves. They're realizing just how much harm's way they're putting their staff into. So a lot of them are just making the leap into deploying court security. For your part, is it possible to convince them in any way, shape, or form that this is likely going to happen to them eventually based on the fact that they are so vulnerable? Or are they simply based with the blinders, that happens somewhere else? Which is it? The latter? Is there any benefit to, as a trainer, we use the term vicarious liability, which basically says you knew, did nothing about it, you're on the hook. Is there any benefit to leveraging that?
Possibly. He throws the budget and says, do you want people on the street taking care of our citizens, or do you want somebody in the courtroom? So he sees it as you know, these people are, I think, more important than what's happening in a courtroom.
Have you ever memorialized those concerns in writing? I tell you that I have had bosses who didn't react to my pleases until I put it in writing, and they realized that it's now there forever.
Right.
And all of a sudden it was, what can I do for you, Michael?
Right. And my judges have, well, I have one judge, and then our circuit court has one. And they push hard, and they are continually telling him, we have got to have more. We need more. And he comes back with, I have people in the courtroom during hearings. I don't need people there on a day-to-day basis.
Again,
So-
I would suggest potentially putting those concerns in writing.
Yeah.
And do it for all of your staff members who are uncomfortable in that workspace. You're now putting him on notice that he's created an unsafe work environment.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I would like to encourage you all to take these ideas back to your respective courts and work with your leadership teams to help implement them. And in your evaluations today, please provide us, NACM, some feedback on security and these types of training sessions. I think that they're very important to our court staff and our courts. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.